Good morning. This rainy, cool, midwinter Saturday morning here in British Columbia. We do have some of the first flowers blooming, although it's just about to turn February, and very mild winter. But I wanted to respond to one matter that I was speaking at the University of Miami, in Miami, Florida, last week. And I mentioned that there are no absolutes in the human condition. And I think that might have been misunderstood by one or two people. We're not talking about the divine or about God's revelation. We're talking about the human condition. Even when we have revelation from God, we do things with it that mean that the minute it's involved in the human condition, there's no absolute. Every scripture, every revelation of God suddenly becomes interpreted by human beings and applied in the way that they please, and very often becomes reshaped by our own human ideologies. So we cannot say that we have in the human condition absolutes. This is something perhaps somebody should think about a little. The only absolute, of course, is God, the Holy Trinity. The will of God is perfect. We don't need to use the word absolute, we need to use the word perfect. Absolute has certain political, philosophical connotations. Something that is absolute is not necessarily perfect. God's will is perfect. The human condition, however, does not permit us to form absolutes. If it did, then one political party would be absolutely good and the other absolutely bad, or both would be absolutely bad. One school of philosophy would be absolutely good, another absolutely bad. That isn't the case, obviously. One set of interpretations of Scripture would be absolutely good and another would be absolutely bad. That also is obviously not the case. So we're not talking about God's will and we're not talking about the divine. We're talking about the actions and the mind of fallen humanity. Because we're a fallen humanity, we cannot claim that any of us has absolute knowledge, that any of us is absolutely good, or that any of us knows the absolute good and the absolute bad, the absolutely right, the absolutely wrong. Every time we turn around, we find that some opinion, point of view, or some absolute that we held has been disproved and overturned. This, of course, never happens with the will of God, but in our human condition. When we think we have the absolute knowledge, understanding, right, or correctness, or anything else, we become oppressors. And the idea that we possess something absolute actually leads us into horrendous sins and to really evil deeds against other people. So let's leave absolute to God and not pretend that in our human condition we can have absolutes. And I want to take this a little step further because we've been discussing a little bit about monasticism also in Florida and marriage. And marriage and monasticism are both equal paths to salvation. Equal paths to salvation. Both require a great struggle against our ego, self-centeredness, self-love. Marriage can be a type and likeness of Christ and the church. Monasticism cannot fulfill that revelation. Male and female were created in order to provide that revelation. And marriage is a type and likeness of Christ and the church. So we need to think very seriously about Paul's words about marriage. Marriage is in itself a form of prayer. The struggle to hold marriage together the struggle against our egotism, our pride, our self-will, our self-centeredness. When we begin to raise children, the raising of children is also a form of prayer. It is in our children that we ourselves find the possibility of a genuine co-suffering love for our children. Sometimes we find that kind of a love for spouses, but we're much more likely to find it mutually, husband and wife together, having a co-suffering love for the children. And in the struggle of marriage, of raising children, of teaching our children, we will find ourselves fulfilling an active prayer life in and of itself. And so this is something we should think about in connection with marriage. The other thing is that we should not always look upon monasticism as some kind of perfection in and of itself. Some very powerful and destructive heresies have developed in monasticism. And the influence of Manichaean monasticism upon a good bit of the ascetic literature within Orthodox monasticism is palpable and clear. And this includes the forgeries of works attributed to Holy Fathers, which were actually written by Gnostics, and then became insinuated into the Orthodox Church, largely through monastic literature. And we have only to turn to 19th century Russia to see the catastrophes which can come to pass in monasticism. The 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, saw a number of monasteries become filled with the heresy of Christism. Now, this took place in the Pskov Lavra, in dozens of monasteries across the Volga. I believe I have a list of some of them here, in fact, that, the Nikov Hermitage, the Pskov, Suzdal, Podolsk, and Olonets monasteries, all were deeply, deeply influenced by Christism, which was one of the more powerful heresies in Russia. Indeed, it's generally agreed that Grigor Rasputin was a Christ and not an Orthodox Christian. Now, Christism was particularly powerful also in the Caucasus. And in the Caucasus, the Holy Name heresy developed, spread to Mount Athos, and became so powerful in Mount Athos that the monks who adhered to this Holy Name heresy rose up and threw the abbots out of their monasteries, sometimes violently and with great force. And so strong and so dangerous did the Holy Name heresy become on Mount Athos that the Patriarchate of Constantinople and the Greek Church condemned it and wanted literally to close down the Russian monastery on Mount Athos. And finally, the Russian government had to send a warship and take more than 1,000 monks off of Mount Athos who were deeply infected with this Christ-like heresy of the Holy Name. So we've seen time and time again how many monasteries were monophysite. Other monasteries had been Arian, and some monasteries were Nestorian. Indeed, Muhammad's first spiritual teacher was a Nestorian monk, a great ascetic and a great struggler in Mesopotamia, in the southern part. And yet he was a Nestorian, a heretic. So we see that sometimes looking blindly at monasticism, as if it had some automatic perfection, can be quite dangerous to the soul. We have to weigh all things. And this is something that we will have to discuss from time to time a little later, because it's really quite significant and quite important. So we'll take it up again a little later, and thank you and God bless you.